Choosing your first telescope for astroimaging can be a very daunting task, I assure you. Receive those first images and you process that out, you will be you'll be on the moon. Welcome to the Easy Astro Image channel, everybody. My name is Chad. I'd like to share my experiences with you on helping maybe choosing your first telescope for astroimaging, whether it be a refractor, a Schmidt-Cassegrain, all of the above. I've got some extensive experience and I've owned a lot of telescopes and I've sold a lot of telescopes. It's just the way that this goes. So don't worry about making that first decision. It's definitely not going to be your last. Now, most of us will start looking for our first telescopes by browsing cloudy nights, doing searches on YouTube, or looking at pictures and asking a lot of questions on Facebook. Now, I ebb and go with the flow basically based on what kind of telescope that I prefer to use. I do have my preferences. We'll go over those later. But right now we're in some interesting challenges. We have supply chain shortages and we also have price hikes. So it's actually not been a bad time to buy telescopes because the used market is just flooded with. I've heard rumors that some very popular telescopes might not even be in stock until this time next year. And that is a very sad state for the hobby. I see a lot of people offer up advice that the first telescope you should have for imaging should be something like a refractor with a DSLR camera on it that you might already have. And I think that's great, but the way that all of this stuff runs right now, and I believe to get the best, easiest images, which is what this channel is all about, would be to go with one of the ZWO type of cameras. From there, you can kind of pick and choose your telescope and build an imaging system that you can move from scope to scope as you actually change. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The other thing to consider is what time of year it is. Some seasons lend themselves to more and larger or smaller targets, and that's kind of where you get into the whole owning a couple different kind of telescopes, because each one is going to be really good at doing different things and imaging different kind of objects. Look at Stellarium here. We're getting all of these awesome winter objects that are popping up right now. You know, we've got the Orion Nebula, we've got the Horsehead in here, we've got the Rosette, we've got all kinds of great stuff here in this entire area of Orion, also known as Bernard's Loop. But in the middle of the night later on, we've got early spring stuff coming up like galaxies. So therefore, you could get a lot of use out of a scope with a longer focal length for a more narrow field of view. Let's just take a look here. If you look at this field of view right here, this is with my current camera, the ZWO 183, and my Hyperstar C6 telescope. So basically a RASA 6. If we look at this view here, you can see that we can capture multiple galaxies all inside one shot. But if we change telescopes to my William Optics GT81 Gran Turismo edition, you can see that the field gets a little bit tighter. And finally, if we go to my Ritchie Crichton 6-inch that is slightly reduced, you can see that we are zoomed in really tight on this stuff. And of course, it's going to put some more demands on our system. Now, I do all of my astrophotography off of a Skywatcher EQ6R Pro mount. Very important decision that you'll have to make up front as well. If you end up going with some type of a kit, you're going to have to make a decision on whether or not you want to get something that has a true equatorial mount, which follows the stars in the nighttime, or something like an alt-azimuth mount, which will only move in a couple directions. You can still get great results with either one, but the equatorial is pretty much the way to go. These also are very difficult to find right now and are highly sought after. There's also some options from Celestron, perhaps the AVX mount, I've owned that in the past, and the Orion versions of the Skywatcher mount, the Atlas and the Sirius EQG. Those are both good options as well. So in the past, I've owned various versions from Celestron. I started out back with an 8SE a long time ago and quickly outgrew that when my needs went from a visual astronomy to more of an astrophotography type of a deal. You can use these for some astrophotos. They're just a little bit more difficult to work with. Something like this with on an actual equatorial mount is more along the lines. Now, these are going to be really cool to have for galaxy season, which is starting now and coming up already, even though we're just in the winter time right now. If you take a look at some of these unprocessed images that I took last year, we've got the Whale Galaxy, the Owl Nebula, and of course M101. There's plenty of other ones that I have as well. These were all shot with my RC6 scope. The Ritchie Crichton scopes are kind of a niche area, but they're really great, and you shouldn't be afraid of things that you might hear as far as collimation problems and everything like that. You can often find these at pretty good deals. I have a 6-inch, but I would love to have an 8-inch. It would just go in even further. And I really like the diffraction spikes that you get. It's just kind of that cool thing. Some people do not enjoy them in their images, but I think they add some pretty nice flair. So I still own the RC6. Like I said, it's sitting right back here on the table, actually. I was looking at it today. It's great because like I said it before, I will take my imaging train from ZWO where everything just kind of fits together. The camera, the filter wheel, the guider, and it all gives you this beautiful spacing of 55 millimeters. And a lot of these new telescopes and cameras, you'll see all kind of revolve around 55 millimeters with some slight adjustments and variations on other ones. So I can take everything off of my current refractor that it's on, the GT81, which we'll talk about. And all I got to do is screw a 30 millimeter adapter onto the front, stick it into the RC, and I am ready to go for galaxy season, shooting at about a focal length of 1200. So while my favorite scope, which I have a love-hate relationship with, is out at service, I decided to start dipping my toes a little bit into the refractor business. Now, I've owned refractors in the past, but I've always been more of a Schmidt-Cassegrain fan, honestly. They just seem to be more flexible and everything like that. But I did say they're a little bit more demanding. So I wanted to have something that was really nice for a wide field for the summer, late fall, and these winter objects. So I started out with the Radian 61. I probably should have went with the William Optics Space Cat Red Cat 51. Probably would have worked out a lot better. I actually ended up selling this Radian 61 after only owning it for a couple months. It's kind of the way that this hobby goes. Currently on my mount, my second current scope is the William Optics Gran Turismo 81 refractor. This is probably the nicest telescope that I've ever owned. The machining on everything, the way it's put together, all the thought and everything that goes into it is just amazing. It's definitely well worth the money. There's a lot of other options in this size that are definitely cheaper. One comes to mind is the Explorer Scientific ED80. It's very popular. I found it very difficult to work with though, and I could never get a flattener that would actually give me a true wide field that was flat from edge to edge. I had a lot of distortion problems. It was hard to mount finder scopes and my ASIair to it. Now, my favorite scope to use is this right here, the Celestron Rasa 8-inch. Boy, did I love this scope. And yes, I said did because I did sell it, but I will tell you why here shortly. The Rasa is a true astrograph. It is able to just capture things like you would not believe. When you point it at the sky and you take quick 15 to 30 second exposures, or if you're crazy and you go even longer, the skies just light up with everything. Here's a couple unprocessed images. Here's a processed image of the Elephant Trunk Nebula. You can see the elephant trunk in there. Here's the lobster claw, the bubble, and some other objects that are inside this field of view. The Rasa is just amazing, but it does have a lot of issues. There's different adapters and sliders and everything else that you can get. The critical focus on these things running at such a high speed is just, it's such a demanding optical system, and Celestron really needs to revise this scope in order to make it easier to use for the consumer in order to get great images. I won't be buying another Rasa until they come out with a version 2. Instead, what I have decided to do is to purchase a 6-inch Celestron Schmidt Cassegrain and then add to it the Hyperstar. which will turn it into a RASA basically. The people at Starzona are kind of the people that started all this. This makes our SCT telescopes even more flexible. So a 1500 millimeter C6 can actually become a 300 millimeter ultra wide, ultra fast photon gathering machine. I cannot wait till this all gets here so I can get it thrown onto the mount and just get going. Now, the other great thing about the SCTs, of course, is that you can just pick up and use regular reducers on them as well. Celestron makes one, even though I had some reflections with it. So I would buy something that's a little bit more high end. The folks at Starzona do sell different kind of SCT correctors and flat field reducers that you can just throw right on to any imaging train and use with your Celestron or any other SCT. You can see here the different focal lengths and the equivalent focal ratios that you would get when using something like this. So it'll kind of give you a little bit wider field and it'll just speed things up and you'll be able to gather more photons in no time. Here's some images that I've taken recently with the GT81. You can just see how wide everything is with the rosette, the Pleiades, and the elephant trunk again. It's just been a fantastic scope. I love using it. I haven't had it that long. It's going to be a shame that it's going to come off of the mount when the RASA gets here. And in fact, it might end up getting sold as well. I'm not 100% sure yet. It's pretty close to the focal length that I will have, but I really like having the advantage of having a refractor. So the great thing about having a refractor or a Schmidt-Cassegrain is just the ability to just change things and move everything around. Now, we don't have as many options with a refractor as far as changing focal ratios and speeds, but what we do have is all of this clearance off the back end. So you can pile on things like filter wheels, reducers, cameras, and you're always going to be just like right there and you're not going to have any problems. Now with a RASA or a Hyperstar equivalent that I will be dealing with, I can't put anything else on the front of that. All I can do is use something like a filter slider drawer to change filters. No automation when it comes to that. I can automate the focuser, which is fine, but when I put a filter in for the night, unless I want to get up in the middle of the night, I can't change that. Now with an actual refractor or an SCT, I can do that. I can also do the focusing and everything too. I have electronic focus motors on all of my scopes. So what telescope should you buy right now? Well, it's kind of hard to say because I don't really know what is in stock at this point. It changes daily. But if I were to make a couple recommendations, if you have a good budget and you're ready to go, I would get the EQ6R mount. I would get you a nice ZWO camera, whether you want to start in the monochrome adventure or the one-shot color, depending upon how much fuss and how many extra things you want to buy. I love the 183 camera. It's a little bit of an older design, but it still gets the job done. The newer ZWO cameras are the 533, the 2600. Those are very clean sensors, but the 2600 is really big and it's got a price tag of $2,000. And the 533 is really small and it's got a price tag of around $1,000. It'd be nice to have a sensor size somewhere in the middle with one of their newer age sensors, kind of like an updated version of the 183. Therefore, if you're wanting something small and wide field and premium that you will keep forever, I would recommend to go with one of the William Optics Red Cat Space Cat 51s. I just don't think that you can beat those. If you don't really see yourself shooting very large, wide targets, which I will tell you, it is a little bit limited as far as what you would shoot with that kind of combination, then the Red Cat 71, it would be an excellent addition as well. If you're thinking maybe you'll get a head start on galaxy season, then you got to go with any kind of Schmidt-Cassegrain that you can get. If you're interested in a Hyperstar, you're going to have to go with a Celestron. If you're not really worried about wide field, high speed astrophotography, then you might definitely want to consider one of the Ritchie Crichton scopes that I have. $540 right now, hard to believe. The scope used to be $400 just a couple months ago. But the 6-inch, like I own back there, is a fantastic scope. It will get the job done for you. There's so many different options of focal reducers from Starzona and everybody else that you're just going to have a great time. And you saw the images that I took with it. They're just amazing. So that's going to do it, guys. If you have any questions about everything, please do not hesitate to ask. I will give you my honest feedback in every way possible that I can to try to help you out. I've been doing this for years, selling and everything, but I've only been in that actual astrophotography for a couple years now. I used to do the electronic video imaging type of stuff, and that's something that you might not be very aware of, and you might find interesting too. It's called live stacking. The ASI Pro, the ASI Pro Plus, they all do it. So anyway, I hope you're having clear skies and peace.